She was only 11 when her world quietly broke apart. Her father had been the only person who truly saw her, who asked if she had eaten, who listened when she spoke. When he passed away after a sudden illness, the house did not just lose a man. It lost warmth, safety, and love. After the funeral, people came for a few days with kind words and food, then slowly disappeared. What stayed behind was silence and a woman who made that silence heavy. The woman was her stepmother. At first, she pretended to care. She spoke softly in front of neighbors and relatives, placing a hand on the girl's shoulder as if to show concern. But when the doors closed and no one was watching, her voice changed. Her eyes became cold. The girl learned very quickly that this house was no longer her home. Every morning she woke up before the sun, not because she wanted to, but because she had to. She cleaned the floors quietly, washed dishes left from the night before, prepared breakfast she was rarely allowed to eat. If a cup was not placed correctly, or if a corner of the floor still had dust, harsh words followed. Sometimes worse than words. The girl never argued. She never raised her voice. She believed staying quiet would keep her safe. Her room was no longer her room. It became a small space near the storage area, with barely enough light. Most of her things were taken away or thrown out. Old clothes that once belonged to others were handed to her. They were often too big or too worn, but she accepted them without complaint. She learned how to sew small tears at night using a needle she hid under her pillow. At school, teachers noticed she was changing. She was still polite, still respectful, but something was missing. She no longer raised her hand in class. She no longer talked about her dreams. Her homework was always complete, but her eyes were tired. When asked if everything was okay at home, she smiled and said yes. She did not know how to explain pain that had no bruises, pain that lived quietly inside. The stepmother treated her like she was invisible unless something went wrong. If food was missing, it was her fault. If bills were late, she was blamed for being unlucky. If guests came over, she was ordered to serve them, but never allowed to sit. The stepmother made sure to remind her often that she was not truly family, that she should be grateful for having a roof over her head. Sometimes, late at night, the girl remembered how her father used to read with her, how he told her that kindness was strength, not weakness. Those memories were the only thing that kept her going. She whispered them to herself when things became too hard, like a quiet promise that life could be different. Money in the house was not a problem, but love was. The stepmother spent freely on herself while telling the girl they could not afford new shoes or school supplies. When the girl asked carefully for something she needed, she was called selfish. After that, she stopped asking. Days turned into months. The girl grew thinner, quieter, and more careful. She learned how to move through the house without making noise, how to finish tasks before being told, how to read the stepmother's mood just by the sound of her footsteps. Survival became her daily goal. One afternoon, while cleaning the living room, she found an old photo of her father smiling beside her. She held it for a moment, feeling both comfort and pain. Before she could put it away, the stepmother saw her. The photo was snatched from her hands and thrown into a drawer. She was told never to touch things that did not belong to her. That night, the girl cried quietly into her pillow. Not loudly. She had learned that loud crying only brought trouble. She cried for her father, for the life she lost, and for the child she was slowly forgetting how to be. She did not know it yet. But her suffering was not invisible forever. Somewhere beyond that house, someone would notice. Someone would see what others ignored. But for now, all she knew was this: she had to survive another day in a house that treated her like nothing. Spilled a drink or knocked over a decoration, she hurried to clean it up before anyone could notice, all while feeling a sting in her chest from the unfairness of it all. After the event ended, she helped pack up the supplies, put away chairs, and carefully stored leftover food. The stepmother barely looked at her, satisfied with the work done, but the girl felt an invisible weight pressing on her. She longed for kindness, even a small word of appreciation. She longed for someone to notice her efforts without making her feel small. And somewhere in the crowd, someone did. The man later spoke to a few other adults about the event, asking questions in a way that showed he was paying attention to more than just appearances. He asked subtle questions about the girl, about how she handled responsibilities, and how she managed under pressure. He listened to answers carefully, piecing together the story without directly confronting anyone. He did not offer judgment openly, but his concern was evident. The girl returned home that evening exhausted. Her hands blistered, her back sore, and her heart heavy. The stepmother barely acknowledged her presence, instead complaining about trivial issues and criticizing her for not finishing some minor task quickly enough. The girl nodded silently, obeyed, and retreated to her small room. She sat on the floor, her back against the wall, and let herself rest, thinking about the man who had noticed her that day. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine that someone might see her value, might understand the struggle she faced every day. Night fell, and the house became quiet. The stepmother went to her room, leaving the girl alone. She opened her small notebook, something she had kept hidden for years, and wrote about the day. She wrote about the hard work, the fear, the exhaustion, but also about the brief moment of recognition from the man at the event. That single moment was enough to spark a tiny flame of hope in her heart. She fell asleep thinking about how unfair life had been, but also about the possibility that maybe, just maybe, someone beyond her home could see her worth. That thought stayed with her, fragile but persistent, as she drifted into sleep, unaware that her life was about to intersect with someone who could change her path in ways she had never imagined. Days passed after the charity event, but the girl could not forget the man who had quietly watched her. In her daily life, the routine at home remained the same harsh words, heavy chores, and constant reminders that she did not belong. Yet, the memory of his calm attention lingered, a small beacon in her otherwise gray existence. She wondered who he was and why he had noticed her when no one else had. There was no way for her to know that he had taken a genuine interest in understanding her life beyond the surface of appearances. The man, the billionaire, did not act immediately, but he kept observing. From that day on, whenever there was an opportunity to see her, he did. At the next few charity events and public functions, he noticed how she moved quietly, how she responded to orders without complaint, and how she showed care in small, unnoticed ways. He observed her resilience, her quiet strength, and her ability to keep composure under constant pressure. The more he saw, the more he realized that her life was not easy, and that the world outside her home was unaware of the daily challenges she faced. He began asking subtle questions of people around him, organizers, teachers, and neighbors. He learned about her home life indirectly, gathering fragments of information. No one knew exactly how much the stepmother oppressed her, but there were hints. A girl who worked too hard, a girl who appeared exhausted, a girl who carried burdens that were not hers. The billionaire quietly pieced the puzzle together, careful not to alarm the girl or create more difficulties for her. He understood that any sudden attention could trigger the stepmother's anger, making her life even more difficult. Meanwhile, at school, the girl tried to maintain her routine. She kept her head down, focused on her work, and tried to avoid trouble. But the curiosity about the man who had noticed her lingered. She wondered why someone would care about a girl no one else saw. His presence gave her a sense of hope she did not dare name. Hope had been a dangerous companion in her life. It could be crushed at any moment. She could not help but feel it nonetheless. One afternoon, the billionaire arranged for a small initiative at her school. A workshop on skills for young students, something practical, engaging, and inclusive. She was assigned to help organize it, just as she had done for other events. At first, she felt dread. Every time she tried to participate or be useful, she was treated like she was invisible. Yet, there was something different this time. The billionaire himself was present, overseeing the activities. He smiled at the participants, asked questions, and took the time to notice small details. When he saw her, he nodded a simple gesture, but one that made her heart beat faster. Throughout the workshop, she moved silently among the students, helping, adjusting, cleaning, and ensuring everything ran smoothly. Unlike before, she did not feel entirely invisible. The billionaire's quiet attention gave her a strange confidence, a sense that someone beyond her home recognized her effort. She began to notice the subtle difference in his approach. He did not give orders. he did not judge. He only observed, acknowledged, and encouraged. After the workshop ended, he spoke to her directly for the first time outside the crowd. His voice was gentle, deliberate, and full of curiosity. He asked simple questions about her experiences, what she enjoyed, and what she found difficult. She answered shyly, hesitant at first, unsure if she should speak about her home life. But his presence was calm, and for the first time, she felt that her words mattered. She did not have to hide behind silence. That conversation marked a turning point. The billionaire began to understand not just the surface struggles, but the deeper challenges, the neglect, the emotional strain, and the quiet endurance. He realized that the girl had survived years of hardship with remarkable resilience. Her ability to maintain composure, kindness, and focus in the face of constant mistreatment left a profound impression on him. He saw a person of great potential who had been overlooked, silenced, and undervalued for far too long. Back at home, the girl noticed subtle changes in the world around her. People in the neighborhood, aware of her situation, started being kinder in small ways. A teacher offered extra tutoring, a neighbor lent books, and a friend shared small joys. Though her stepmother continued to treat her poorly, the presence of small, positive influences began to soften the edges of her life. The billionaire's quiet intervention created ripples that were beginning to reach her, even if she did not fully understand it yet. The billionaire also started taking discreet actions to learn more about her family situation. He observed how she interacted at home, watched how the stepmother reacted to her, noticed the imbalance of care and attention. He did not confront or accuse, understanding that exposure could make her life more difficult. Instead, he documented observations, spoke to social workers subtly, and consulted experts about the best way to intervene safely. His goal was not to dramatize the situation, but to ensure that someone was finally protecting her from harm. Over time, the girl began to feel a subtle shift within herself. She realized that she could imagine a future beyond her current circumstances. The spark of recognition from the billionaire, combined with small acts of kindness, gave her a sense that her voice could matter someday. She started thinking in terms of possibilities, education, creativity, independence, concepts that had been distant and almost unimaginable before. One evening, after completing her chores, she sat by the small window in her room, looking at the quiet streets outside. She reflected on the weeks that had passed since the first event where the billionaire had noticed her. There had been struggles, yes, but also small moments of encouragement that she had not allowed herself to acknowledge. She realized that survival was no longer her only goal. Hope, cautious but persistent, had found a way into her heart. The billionaire continued to observe, assuring that he understood her situation without creating fear or additional pressure. His attention was steady, calm, and intentional. Unlike the stepmother, he did not offer false promises or patronizing gestures. He recognized her strength and her vulnerabilities, understanding that any meaningful intervention needed to be thoughtful, measured, and protective. As the days turned into weeks, his presence became an invisible safety net. She did not see him every day, but the knowledge that someone beyond her immediate struggles was aware of her circumstances gave her courage. It allowed her to endure the stepmother's harshness with a little more patience, knowing that she was not truly alone. For the first time, she felt the possibility of someone believing in her, not because of what she did for them, but simply for who she was. The billionaire also began exploring ways to provide educational opportunities that aligned with her interests and talents. He arranged for specialized classes, mentoring, and exposure to new experiences, all done quietly so she would not feel embarrassed or overwhelmed. He wanted her to grow, not as a charity case, but as a young person discovering her own potential. This careful, unobtrusive support allowed her to develop confidence and skills in ways that had been denied to her before, even though life at home did not change immediately. The girl started to feel a sense of balance within herself. She realized that her worth was not determined by her stepmother's treatment. She could envision a life where she was respected, nurtured, and free to explore her talents. The billionaire's attention had introduced a new possibility, future shaped by care, understanding, and opportunity rather than fear and oppression. By the end of this period, the girl had grown stronger in ways that were not visible to the world. Her resilience was quiet but undeniable. She had learned to navigate adversity with grace, to recognize genuine kindness, and to allow herself moments of hope without feeling guilty. The billionaire, in turn, had become a silent guardian, understanding the delicate balance between intervention and observation. He knew the time would come to act more directly, but only when it was safe and appropriate for her well-being. Through careful observation, subtle support, and unwavering attention, the billionaire had become an unexpected source of strength in her life. His presence marked the beginning of a shift, not a dramatic rescue, but the start of a journey where her worth could finally be recognized. And though she did not yet fully understand the impact of his attention, the girl felt a change within her, the possibility that life could be different, that someone beyond her stepmother's cruelty cared, and that her silent endurance could one day lead to a life of respect, opportunity, and dignity. The days at home continued to be harsh. The stepmother's words grew sharper, and her expectations never eased. The girl carried out her chores with quiet determination, never complaining, never showing weakness. But the burden weighed on her more heavily than ever. She learned to anticipate anger, to move through the house as silently as a shadow, and to keep her emotions carefully hidden. Every small mistake was magnified. Every effort she made was dismissed or criticized. But outside the walls of the house, change was quietly unfolding. The billionaire had been observing carefully for months, piecing together a clear picture of her life. He had consulted with trusted social workers and experts, ensuring that any steps taken would protect her rather than endanger her further. He understood the delicate balance. If he acted too quickly, the stepmother might retaliate. If he waited too long, the girl would continue to suffer needlessly. Patience, he realized, was the first act of protection. Finally, the day came when he could no longer remain an observer. A small but significant incident pushed him to act. The stepmother, in a fit of anger, berated the girl in front of neighbors while she attempted to deliver groceries. The words were cruel, relentless, and publicly humiliating. The girl, accustomed to such treatment, kept her head down, moving as quickly as possible to complete the task, but the humiliation was sharp and deep. Those who witnessed it felt sympathy, but no one knew how to intervene. The billionaire had been passing by the street where the incident occurred. He saw the stepmother's cruelty firsthand and the girl's silent endurance. The sight stirred a determination in him that observation alone was no longer sufficient. He made the decision to step in, carefully and thoughtfully, knowing that a direct confrontation could bring unexpected consequences. His goal was not to punish the stepmother for appearances alone, but to ensure the girl's safety and well-being. The first step involved subtle inquiries. He arranged discreet meetings with neighbors, teachers, and local authorities to confirm what he had observed. Each conversation painted a fuller picture: the stepmother's consistent mistreatment, the girl's resilience, and the lack of outside protection. With enough evidence, he was able to approach the situation strategically. His plan was meticulous. He wanted to intervene in a way that was safe, effective, and sustainable. Once he had gathered the necessary information, he approached the girl gently. He did not offer dramatic promises or sudden declarations. Instead, he spoke to her with calm assurance, letting her know that he was aware of the difficulties she faced and that she was not alone. His presence, careful and steady, reassured her. For the first time, she felt someone standing beside her without expecting anything in return. Someone who saw her value and wanted to protect it together. They began the process of bringing the situation to light. The billionaire coordinated with social workers, school officials, and local authorities to ensure that the girl's living conditions were addressed immediately. They worked quietly, so the stepmother would not have the chance to retaliate before the intervention was in place. Every step was carefully planned. Who would speak, what would be documented, and how to present the facts in a way that highlighted the girl's experience without causing her further trauma. When the intervention was ready, it was executed with precision. Authorities visited the home, and social workers spoke with the girl in a safe, confidential environment. She was able to describe her daily life without fear, supported by professionals who understood the importance of listening and believing her. The stepmother, confronted with undeniable evidence, was forced to acknowledge the consequences of her actions. The girl, once silenced and dismissed, now had her voice recognized and her experiences validated. The billionaire remained by her side throughout the process, not as a dramatic savior, but as a careful guardian. He understood that the most important thing was to ensure her safety and emotional well-being. The girl began to feel a sense of relief she had never known. For the first time in her life, someone outside her home cared enough to act, and the results were tangible. She was no longer entirely at the mercy of the stepmother's cruelty. With the stepmother held accountable, arrangements were made for the girl to live in a safer environment. She was offered support, education, and opportunities that had been denied to her for years. The transition was not easy. Habits, fears, and learned caution do not disappear overnight. But the girl approached it with the quiet resilience that had carried her through years of hardship. She was learning to trust, to accept care, and to imagine a life that could be shaped by her own choices rather than by oppression. The billionaire's involvement was careful and deliberate. He provided guidance and resources, but he did not impose his will. He encouraged the girl to explore her interests, pursue her education, and discover her strengths. This approach allowed her to regain a sense of agency that had been stolen from her. She began to participate in activities she had only dreamed of, attend classes that stimulated her mind, and engage with mentors who valued her thoughts and abilities. During this period, the girl's confidence grew steadily. The validation she received, combined with the safe environment and opportunities to learn, allowed her to take small steps toward independence. She started making decisions about her daily life, setting goals, and exploring interests she had previously kept hidden. The experience of being heard, respected, and protected became transformative, reinforcing her belief that her life could be different. As time passed, the girl began to understand the depth of the billionaire's care. His attention was not about wealth or fame. It was about recognizing human dignity, protecting a vulnerable person, and providing a pathway to a life of opportunity. She realized that this intervention was not a single moment of rescue, but an ongoing support system that allowed her to grow, heal, and regain control over her life. Through this process, the stepmother's influence was reduced significantly. While the girl had once lived in fear of confrontation and punishment, she now had advocates who ensured her safety and well-being. The shift was profound. A life once dominated by cruelty and suppression was now infused with protection, guidance, and respect. Each day, the girl's sense of self-worth strengthened. Replacing years of doubt and silence, the experience left an indelible mark on the girl. She realized that her endurance, patience, and quiet strength had not gone unnoticed. She also understood that there were people willing to intervene when they saw injustice. People who could create meaningful change without dramatic fanfare. The billionaire's careful, deliberate actions had provided her with more than safety. They had given her the tools to rebuild her life and the belief that she could shape her future by the end of this phase. The girl had taken significant steps toward independence. She was learning to navigate the world with confidence, supported by a network of people who recognized her potential. Her past, though still a part of her, no longer dictated her future. She had survived cruelty, endured hardship, and now, with careful intervention and protection, she was beginning to thrive. This turning point marked the beginning of a new chapter. The girl had experienced true compassion, careful guidance, and protection from harm. The billionaire's intervention had not been about sudden wealth or grand gestures. It had been about understanding, patience, and deliberate action to ensure her safety and growth. With the stepmother's influence diminished and her own resilience strengthened, the girl was finally positioned to embrace opportunities that had been long denied to her. Her life, once constrained by fear and oppression, was now opening toward a future filled with possibility, dignity, and hope. The girl's life began to change gradually but meaningfully. Each morning, she woke up not to fear or commands, but to a world that offered her choices. She still had responsibilities and tasks, but they were no longer enforced through cruelty. She could take her time to learn, explore, and understand herself. The small room she now had was bright and filled with books, her own clothes, and a sense of comfort she had never experienced. For the first time, she could sit by the window and plan her day without anxiety pressing down on her. Education became a central part of her life. She had always loved learning, but before, the demands and fear at home had left little room for curiosity. Now, with the Billionaire's support and guidance, she could attend classes that suited her interests, receive tutoring when needed, and participate in workshops that expanded her horizons. Every lesson, every new skill felt like a victory, a sign that she was reclaiming parts of herself that had been suppressed for years. Mentorship played an important role in her growth. She had access to people who genuinely cared about her development, who asked her questions not to test her, but to understand her thoughts, ideas, and ambitions. They encouraged her to pursue her dreams, provided feedback, and celebrated her achievements, however small. This guidance helped her to regain confidence in her abilities to trust her instincts, and to develop a sense of agency that had been absent for so long. Her social world began to expand as well. She met peers who valued her for her kindness, intelligence, and creativity. Friendships were built on respect and mutual interest, not fear or obligation. She learned to communicate more openly, to express her feelings, and to enjoy companionship without the constant worry of being judged or punished. These interactions strengthened her emotional well-being and reinforced the belief that she was deserving of respect and care. At home, the stepmother's influence had diminished significantly. The girl no longer lived under constant threat of humiliation or harsh criticism. She had space to be herself and make decisions without fear. While the past experiences had left scars, the supportive environment allowed her to heal. She learned to process the pain, to recognize her strength, and to transform those experiences into motivation for a better future. The billionaire continued to support her, not with extravagance alone, but with attention, advice, and opportunities for growth. He helped her discover interests she had not known she possessed, from arts to problem-solving skills. His guidance was steady, allowing her to learn at her own pace. He encouraged independence, knowing that true empowerment comes from being able to make choices, learn from mistakes, and stand confidently on one's own. Through this support, she developed resilience that was not born out of fear, but out of understanding, confidence, and self-respect. The strength she had always possessed was now combined with knowledge, guidance, and the freedom to pursue her potential. She began to dream in ways that had previously seemed impossible, imagining a life where she could be successful, happy, and fulfilled. Community involvement became another significant aspect of her growth. She engaged in small projects, helped others in ways that reflected her own journey, and shared her experiences to inspire younger children who faced difficulties. She learned that her story, once a source of pain, could become a source of strength and motivation for others. Helping others gave her a sense of purpose and reinforced the value of compassion, empathy, and kindness. The girl's emotional development flourished alongside her academic and social growth. She learned to express her feelings without fear, to recognize and address her own needs, and to set boundaries with people who might not have her best interests at heart. She understood the importance of self-care, self-respect, and maintaining healthy relationships. Her confidence grew naturally. She began to approach life with a sense of curiosity and optimism as she matured. She began to take on challenges independently. Tasks that once felt overwhelming were now opportunities to learn and grow. She applied her skills, sought guidance when necessary, and celebrated accomplishments with pride. She had learned the value of perseverance, hard work, and the importance of a supportive network. Each success, no matter how small, reinforced her belief in herself and her ability to shape her own life. The billionaire's role gradually evolved from that, of a protector to that of a mentor and supporter. He provided opportunities for education, travel, and exposure to new experiences, always allowing her to make her own choices. She learned that guidance does not mean control, and support does not mean dependence. This understanding empowered her to become more self-sufficient, capable, and confident in her decisions. Over time, she also began to reconcile with the past. Memories of fear and cruelty were still present, but they no longer defined her. She understood that those experiences had shaped her resilience, empathy, and strength, but they did not limit her potential. She learned to forgive, not necessarily the stepmother's actions, but the circumstances she could not change in, to focus on the possibilities that lay ahead. Her aspirations became clearer. She dreamed of a career that allowed her to help others, to provide guidance and support to those who faced challenges similar to hers. She considered roles in education, mentorship, or community work, all areas where her experiences and empathy could make a real difference. The skills, confidence, and emotional intelligence she had developed positioned her to pursue these goals with determination and clarity. The girl also embraced creativity and self-expression. She explored writing, art, problem-solving activities that helped her articulate thoughts and emotions she had previously kept hidden. These outlets became sources of joy, reflection, and personal growth. She learned that expression was not only a way to communicate with others, but also a tool for understanding herself, processing experiences, and imagining new possibilities. Family relationships, once defined by fear and control, were gradually redefined. While the stepmother's role was minimized, the girl built connections with relatives and mentors who valued and respected her. She learned to seek support, communicate openly, and establish healthy relationships. The concept of family transformed from a source of fear to a network of care, guidance, and mutual respect. Her health, both physical and emotional, improved as well. No longer burdened by constant stress and abuse, she had the energy to engage in activities that nurtured her body and mind. Nutrition, rest, exercise, and emotional support contributed to a sense of well-being that she had rarely experienced. Her appearance, once neglected, reflected her newfound vitality and confidence. Community recognition also grew. People began to notice her talents, kindness, and resilience. She received praise for accomplishments in school, community projects, and personal initiatives. This recognition, unlike the forced attention from the stepmother, was genuine and affirming. It reinforced her sense of identity, validated her efforts, and encouraged further growth as the girl transitioned into young adulthood. She continued to embrace opportunities for learning, growth, and contribution. She pursued higher education, engaged in meaningful projects, and began to define her path with clarity and purpose. The lessons from her past informed her decisions, guiding her toward choices that aligned with her values, ambitions, and sense of integrity. The billionaire's influence remained as a steady, supportive presence, always emphasizing independence, self-discovery, and personal responsibility. She learned to appreciate guidance without reliance, mentorship without control, and support without obligation. This balance allowed her to develop into a capable, confident individual, ready to navigate life's complexities with wisdom and resilience. By the end of this journey, the girl had transformed her life entirely. The fear, silence, and oppression of her early years had been replaced with confidence, knowledge, and opportunity. She had built a network of support, discovered her talents, and developed a clear sense of purpose. Her experiences, once sources of pain, became pillars of strength, shaping a future filled with potential and hope. Her story was not simply about survival. It was about transformation, empowerment, and the impact of recognition, compassion, and deliberate support. The girl, once invisible and silenced, emerged as a young woman capable of shaping her own life, contributing meaningfully to the world, and inspiring others through her journey. She had learned that with courage, patience, and support, even the most difficult beginnings could lead to a life of dignity, fulfillment, and hope. Even though the girl had begun a new chapter in her life, her journey of growth and discovery continued. Life after the stepmother's influence was not a sudden fairy tale. It was a process filled with learning, adjustments, and new challenges. She realized that moving from survival mode into a life of opportunities required patience, resilience, and courage. Each day presented a chance to make decisions, to pursue knowledge, and to explore the possibilities she had never imagined. One of the first changes she embraced was responsibility for her own daily routine. No longer forced to work under threats or criticism, she organized her day to balance learning, personal growth, and rest. She developed habits that allowed her to manage time efficiently, making space for both education and personal interests. Mornings were spent on academic studies, afternoons exploring hobbies or social interactions, and evenings reflecting on the day and planning for the future. This structure gave her life stability and a sense of control she had never experienced before. Education became not just a task, but a passion. She immersed herself in books, classes, and discussions, always eager to learn something new. The freedom to ask questions, make mistakes, and receive constructive guidance fueled her curiosity. She discovered subjects that fascinated her, skills that inspired her, and talents she had never been able to explore under the stepmother's oppressive control. Learning became a joyful pursuit. Reinforcing her confidence and sense of self-worth, mentorship continued to play a significant role. The billionaire, recognizing her desire to grow independently, provided guidance without imposing control. He introduced her to experts in fields she was curious about, invited her to attend workshops, and encouraged her to take initiative. Through these interactions, she learned how to navigate challenges, make informed decisions, and pursue goals with both ambition and thoughtfulness. The guidance was steady, supportive, and empowering, allowing her to develop skills that would shape her future. The girl also began to explore creative outlets. Writing, painting, and small projects became opportunities to express emotions she had previously kept hidden. These activities were not simply hobbies. They were ways to process experiences, reflect on her journey, and communicate thoughts and feelings in a safe and meaningful way. Creativity offered her freedom, joy, and a sense of personal achievement, reinforcing the growth she had worked so hard to achieve. Socially, her life expanded in meaningful ways. She built friendships based on trust, respect, and shared interests. Learning how to communicate openly and navigate relationships with confidence, she participated in group activities, discussions, and collaborative projects, gradually discovering her ability to work with others while maintaining her own voice. The friendships were not just comforting, they were educational, providing insight, support, and encouragement. Family dynamics continued to shift. Although the stepmother no longer held power over her, the girl learned how to establish boundaries, navigate challenging interactions, and prioritize her own well-being. She cultivated connections with relatives and mentors who valued and respected her, reinforcing the sense of security and support she now had. Through these relationships, she learned that family could be a source of care and guidance rather than fear and depression. The billionaire's continued support allowed her to explore opportunities beyond her immediate environment. She attended cultural events, educational programs, and skill-building activities that broadened her perspective. Exposure to different experiences strengthened her adaptability, confidence, and understanding of the world. She began to see herself not just as a survivor, but as someone capable of achieving meaningful goals and contributing positively to her community. Emotional growth was a central part of this period. The girl learned how to manage stress, express feelings, and develop resilience in ways that were constructive rather than reactive. She reflected on past challenges, understanding the lessons they offered, and applied them to new situations with maturity and insight. Emotional intelligence became a key strength, allowing her to navigate relationships, challenges, and opportunities with clarity and composure. Physical well-being also improved. With stability, proper nutrition, rest, and activities that promoted health, she experienced renewed energy and vitality. Exercise, outdoor activities, and mindful routines contributed to her overall sense of well-being. She became aware of the connection between physical health and emotional strength, and she took conscious steps to maintain balance in both areas. Community involvement became a meaningful focus. The girl began volunteering in ways that reflected her own experiences and empathy. She worked with children who faced hardships, supported local projects, and shared her story in small, impactful ways. This involvement strengthened her sense of purpose and reinforced the values of compassion, resilience, and service. Her contributions, once humble and quiet, were now visible and appreciated by others. Challenges still arose, but she approached them with confidence and determination. Problems that would have once overwhelmed her were now opportunities to apply skills, seek guidance, and find solutions. She learned that mistakes were not failures but learning experiences, and that persistence and patience often led to progress. This mindset shift empowered her to face uncertainty without fear, knowing that she had the tools, support, and resilience to overcome obstacles. Financial independence and planning became part of her journey. She learned how to manage resources, save for future goals, and make informed decisions about expenditures. These skills were essential for building a life of autonomy and security, ensuring that she could sustain the independence she had worked so hard to achieve. The Billionaire's guidance emphasized empowerment rather than dependency, helping her develop confidence in her ability to handle her own affairs. The girl also explored opportunities to mentor younger children facing challenges similar to hers. She provided guidance, encouragement, and empathy, using her own experiences as a source of insight. This mentorship reinforced her sense of responsibility, empathy, and purpose. She realized that her journey was not only about her own success, but also about inspiring and supporting others to overcome adversity. As she matured, she embraced long-term goals and aspirations. Career ambitions, personal development, and community involvement became intertwined, each contributing to a fulfilling, meaningful life. She understood that success was not defined solely by wealth or recognition, but by the ability to contribute, grow, and live with integrity. This understanding shaped her decisions, actions, and approach to life. Her relationship with the billionaire evolved naturally. It became one of mutual respect, guidance, and support. He continued to offer mentorship, opportunities, and advice, but always emphasized her independence and self-determination. She learned the value of guidance without control, support without obligation, and mentorship without dependency. This dynamic allowed her to grow confidently, knowing that she had a safety net but also the freedom to make her own choices. Through these experiences, the girl developed a strong sense of identity and self-worth. She recognized her resilience, intelligence, and capacity for compassion. She embraced the lessons of her past while focusing on the possibilities of the future. Her self-esteem, once fragile and dependent on the perception of others, became rooted in her abilities, values, and achievements. The impact of her journey extended beyond herself. Her story inspired peers, friends, and the community. She became an example of perseverance, growth, and the transformative power of care, mentorship, and opportunity. People admired her not because of her past hardships alone, but because of how she transformed those challenges into strength, empathy, and meaningful contributions. By the end of this phase of her life, the girl had fully embraced the opportunities that had been denied to her for so long. She had developed education, skills, emotional strength, social connections, and personal vision. She understood the importance of resilience, compassion, and deliberate growth. Her life, once defined by fear and suppression, was now defined by potential empowerment and purpose. Her story continued to evolve, but the foundation had been firmly established. She had transformed survival into empowerment, oppression into opportunity, and fear into courage. The journey from a silenced, oppressed child to a confident, independent, and compassionate young adult was ongoing, but the path was now illuminated by knowledge, guidance, and hope. Every step forward was a testament to her resilience, the support she received, and the belief that every person deserves to be seen, valued, and empowered.